Hi guys, and welcome back. Today I'm here with another gameplay idea for you, or a few. So the Build-a-City challenge has been around in Sims 2 and other Sims games for a really long time. And some people may think that it may get boring if you've done it once, you've done it, and why would you do it again? But personally, I think the key lies in creating a different backstory each time. Because if the circumstances that your Sims face are different, then the type of rules you follow can also be different. For instance, what type of buildings you will be building first could be different. Is it going to be a survival situation, or will there be some amenities? Are they going to have SimCity settle them in a new area where SimCity is helping them out with power and some basic services? And will the type of people that resettle there then be maids and gardeners and handymen and firefighters and policemen? So in other words, you would have these services available almost from the beginning. Or are your Sims shipwrecked? Because obviously that would be a very different scenario. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brainstorm some ideas with you. You will view in the background my B-roll footage of my newest Build-a-City challenge, which I haven't posted about, but will, where my Sims are actually shipwrecked. So I'm playing a very survival-based game, although I am allowing certain things or using my imagination with others. I will give you an example. I had a fire, and it was pretty clear my Sims were going to perish at the specific household. But I did end up letting them momentarily have a phone to call the fire brigade, simply because I felt like they would be screaming for help, and the other households nearby, because the group wasn't moving far away from each other at that point where they were settling into different homes, would definitely all run to help, as well as the fact that they had a fishing pond. They also had a water collector that they'd built. I pretended they built that. And in my mind, I can't imagine that with all that, they wouldn't be able to put out that fire. So that is why in the end I did let the fire brigade come, and I used my imagination and said, okay, well, their neighbors helped them, they had plenty of water, and they were able, they had big losses, and they had to rebuild and restock a fridge that now was destroyed, but they still were able to save it. Now, another example, I just mentioned the fridge, is, I'm using a brown colored fridge like I would a cupboard, and I am only allowing them to make certain meals. For instance, they haven't been able to bake bread yet because they don't have ingredients for bread. So they're not making lunch meat sandwiches, for instance. But I am using the fridge and pretending that they're storing their dried berries and dried fish and things like that they're creating from what they have on the island. That they are storing these things in this cupboard. But of course, I need it to be a fridge, otherwise the Sims really cannot make food. So, that's just kind of my imagination that I'm injecting into it. So you will be seeing B-roll footage from my gameplay in the background. But some ideas that I will throw around for you as backstories is the classic Shipwreck, which I'm playing at the moment. There's a violent storm, it destroys the settler ship, or it doesn't have to be settlers. In my case, it's young adults who went on a nice vacation together, which was organized by their university. It was more like an educational tour, supposed to be, between islands, and then they ended up on an uncharted island. So that's what happened in my case. But alright, so a violent storm can destroy the settler ship, and only a handful of survivors wash ashore with a few salvaged supplies. I also pretended that they had some supplies that they salvaged. They have no way to contact civilization, that's the same case for me, and they must build a new town from scratch. So that's one idea. And then you can focus on buildings that you unlock, like the first shelter. I did that. I started with tents and then I went over to their first shelters. I have a lot of mods from a sun and moon factory, which is nice because you can actually cut down some of the trees. So I filmed where my Sims would be cutting down trees. I will show you that. And you know, these type of mods are very handy for that, because obviously your first things that you would build would then be out of wood. All right. A fishing dock, a general store from the salvaged goods, a church to keep hope alive, and eventually a harbor to try and reconnect with the world. Now, I'm taking this very slow because obviously the moment they can reconnect with the world, I mean, you would probably go back to your family and civilization if you are trapped on the island and it wasn't really your choice to be there. You would obviously try to get back to your family. So I'm holding off on having some contact with the outside world. I want it to last a bit longer where they cannot. Now, if you want to play something a bit more historical, you can have 1800s frontier based gameplay where you can do a wagon or train disaster. Make that be your background. You can say that it was a wagon train heading west, but it's separated by floods and landslides, and the survivors discover fertile land but realize winter is approaching and returning is an option. So that could be cool if you end up with rustic builds. I used everything in wood. That was kind of my challenge that I set for myself. Now, of course, beds will have bedding, which the question is immediately, okay, where would they where would they be having material for bedding? But I gave them grace with the idea that some things from their luxury boat, because it was a luxury boat, washed ashore, and that they used these materials and things like that basically to recreate whatever they needed. So I chose a bed that I've downloaded that's from Bamboo, and the the bedding looks a little bit disheveled, and those were the first beds. And then eventually I gave one of my Sims the machine where you can actually make your own garments and needlework with, and I'm kind of playing the role out of she found this machine, they found it washed up, and her husband was able to turn it into something that's working again. He must be very handy, but okay. And now she's repairing clothing for people. She's adjusting clothing because some of the ladies got pregnant later on, and obviously clothing would need some readjustment. And she's also making bed sets and things like that. So eventually she will be obviously someone who owns a clothing store, or something like that. So that's kind of how I created my own headcanon for that. Alright, my builds are very rustic. Just getting back to the builds. Everything's from wood. It's very plain and simple. I try to use furniture initially that is not very fancy with curves and things, because obviously they don't have the tools. Everything is very rugged that they would be creating for themselves. And pretty much everyone has the same type of table, the same type of bench, because, if they're helping each other build and stuff, it would look similar. That's my headcanon for that. Then government land grant. That's another idea you can use. A kingdom or government offers free land to anyone willing to settle an uninhabited valley. The settlers arrive with almost nothing but promises that if they establish a thriving town, they'll officially own the land. This naturally explains taxes, mayors, and eventually larger civic buildings, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense that you would be able to build all these things. And of course, if you play that way, there would be a need for money and taxes, whereas the way I'm playing currently, money doesn't help them at all. They don't really have money. They didn't wash out with, everyone with their wallet intact. So, they don't really have money to do anything with. And at the moment, it's just trade. I have someone who was able to figure out how to make candles. They're hunting, so they obviously have fat from animals and things like that. I'm pretending they're hunting, of course. And so one of them has figured out how to make candles. So they don't have electricity. So since she's got candles, she's trading it, for instance, for a bed set from the lady who's, creating anything out of material. So that's kind of how I'm viewing it at the moment. Now, I'm not physically doing the trading at the moment, although you could definitely. I think when the stores start, that would be how I would pretend that this is working, that they're not actually paying in money, they're just trading with each other. And then eventually they will obviously have a currency or something, but I haven't played out that they've been mining. Now that could be a next step that I do, because Sun, Moon and Star Factory also has mods where you can actually do mining, and I've downloaded it. So that would be the next thing that you do, would be to add mining, because then you can start pretending that they're actually having their own money that they're creating or something like that, So that would be another next step. All right, then another option could be an Apocalypse Survivors challenge. There is a channel that I don't think the specific lady is creating content anymore, but I used to love watching her Apocalypse Survivors, where she actually used the Pleasant View townies, and she had a whole story. It was beautifully done, and yeah, I could link that. I think I will link that for you in the description. It's really worthwhile to check out if you want inspiration for something like that. And there's a lot of custom content. I think it's from Fallout and so that you can use for this, as well as Sun, Moon and Star Factory. I really recommend that, and you can build amazing worlds for your Sims. And you can there's even ways that she shows that you can take away the roads. Now, I haven't done that. I did not take away my roads, because I don't want to go through the hassle of editing that again later. I'm just hiding mine behind trees and hills and things like that. But you can absolutely actually do that. So there's a lot of options available for that. Okay, so that basically, this challenge is where most of civilization has collapsed due to some unknown disaster, and your Sims find untouched farmland and decide to start humanity over, is kind of the idea. Your buildings that you unlock will be because knowledge has been lost and kind of must be rediscovered. So that's something that you can do, and of course, you can let your Sims come across a broken down building that used to be something specific, and then they kind of fix it up and it starts working again. That could be the way that you handle something like that. That could be very interesting. And then another one, Hidden Valley. Several families discover an isolated valley hidden behind mountains. The only pass collapses behind them after an earthquake, trapping everyone inside. The challenge becomes creating a completely self-sufficient community. Now, the self-sufficient community, is also something that I'm creating at the moment, because you start thinking about, okay, what would they need and what would they have nothing to do something with. So that's kind of the idea behind that. Then, escaping persecution. Your Sims belong to a group seeking religious or political freedom. They flee across the sea and establish a settlement where they can finally govern themselves. This creates lots of storytelling, opportunities for mayors, laws, and elections. So that's an interesting one as well. Then, of course, if you want to go over the top, you can have a magical portal. A mysterious portal transports several unrelated Sims into another world. They have no idea where they are. Some hope they'll return home. Others begin embracing their new lives. Perfect if you enjoy witches, plant sims, or fantasy gameplay. I do not play with the occults at all, so this is not something that I would probably ever do. But, it could make for some interesting storytelling, I'm sure. Then this is another take on something like that. Alien colonists. Aliens choose a beautiful Earth valley to study the humans from. Unfortunately, their ship crashes. They must blend in with ordinary Sims while rebuilding enough technology to survive. So, interesting. A mysterious millionaire purchases an enormous stretch of wilderness, and he invites 12 families with different skills to create the perfect town. After arriving, the benefactor disappears, leaving only a letter explaining they are now on their own. That could be an interesting one as well. Then a lost expedition. Scientists, adventurers, and volunteers travel to explore an unknown island. Their transport is destroyed. The expedition becomes permanent. Each Sim's profession suddenly becomes incredibly valuable. So that's an interesting one. And then time travelers. If you're a little bit into sci-fi, a strange experiment goes wrong. Several modern Sims wake up hundreds of years in the past. They remember modern technology but lack the tools to recreate it. Watching them slowly rebuild civilization can be very satisfying. I did something similar, actually, a while ago. I recreated Pleasant View, but somewhere out in the desert. Mine wasn't a time travel, but it was more a change of location. And what I did was I said that Julian Cook's father, who obviously never is around in anything, I just created him, was a mad scientist, and that he was always doing some strange experiment, and that one of his experiments went terribly wrong, and everyone from Pleasant View were transported to a desert town called Newton View. And their memory was completely foggy. They couldn't remember that they came from Pleasant View. They had no idea where they were before. They just kind of wake up one morning and they're married to the people they're married to, and they have the homes they have. So I rebuilt homes. I didn't, use the homes from Pleasant View. And they have the neighbors they have, and those that they were friends with, I kind of have a feeling of friendship towards them. But they can't really remember how it all started. And some of them are starting to wonder if something happened, because they kind of have that feeling, but they can't quite put their finger on it. And so they're living out in the desert, and Julian has a feeling like his dad is behind it because he knows what type of experiments his dad does. So he kind of confronts his dad, and his dad is like saying, "No, I have nothing to do with anything of this, you know." But Julian kind of mistrusts his dad, and eventually Mortimer Goth passes away, and Julian ends up falling in love with Bella Goth, and they're raising the kids that Mortimer and Bella was raising together. They're raising them, some of them being Dina and Nina's kids. It's a long story. And anyhow, so they end up living in this Newton View, and then Julian's father, he marries his maid, by the way, and has a child with the maid, but he ends up passing away, and because his cow plant eats him. And the maid then is stuck in this kind of sciencey house where he did all his experiments, and with a cow plant that she has to take care of and knows nothing of. And it's kind of a big mess, but Julian keeps on having the feeling that he should go through his father's documents and that he would then find out the truth. So I kind of turned it into a mystery story. So this was not something that where I rebuilt them from scratch. I of course rebuilt them, but I didn't make them rebuild anything from scratch, but I put a mystery story behind it. So yeah, you could do stuff like that just to spice up your gameplay. I will show you guys this neighborhood at some stage. I have some episodes uploaded from it as well, which I haven't updated in in quite a while, but there's a lot of fun that you can have with kind of some experiment that goes wrong. All right, then another one that you can do other than time travelers, because watching them slowly rebuild the civilization can really be very satisfying. So they remember their modern technology, but they don't have the tools to recreate it. So that could be interesting for the time travel one. And then there could be a great flood. So massive flooding destroys their hometown, and your survivors travel until they discover high ground where they begin again. This works well if you want every sim to have experienced tragedy but still, kind of remain hopeful. And then you can have another one that you can say, or can call the King's Challenge. So the ruler announces whoever can build a thriving city in the wilderness within one generation shall govern forever. So different families volunteer for different reasons. Some of them volunteer for wealth. Some of them are adventurers and want adventure. Some do it for redemption. Some do it to escape something. And some do it because they have a lot of ambition. So, that could be interesting if you kind of pair specific sims together in families. So you don't start with 8 single people, for instance. You start with ready-made families in this case, kind of like dynasties. That could be an interesting one. I for my challenge right now, I started with 8 single sims, because I said they were kind of like students or just finishing up university, and I didn't bother giving them all the extra ones and whatever, but you could do that for sure with mods and Simpy and things. And then after a while, I let them come across another part of the group that they thought had perished. So it was another 8 sims that had washed up on the other side of the island. So, they met up with each other. So I made that just because you have to add some sims to your civilization at some point. The failed colony could be another option. A settlement once existed there decades ago, but everyone mysteriously disappeared. Your sim arrived to reclaim the abandoned land, uncovering clues about the original settlers as generations pass. This is great if you enjoy creating ruins and mysteries. So this could be fun. I have the idea that at some point on my island, they will come across some evidence that a person has lived there before and try to kind of build something or survive there. Because with this, I want to kind of inject some other technologies or other things for them. For instance, I was thinking of letting this person have a robotic station, a toy making bench, things like that. So, because at the moment they have the woodworking table that they kind of created themselves and they're trying to make stuff from wood. But, eventually this would be something interesting if they were able to find these things and then not having to reinvent them from scratch, basically. So they could use these things. Okay, then something else you can do is you can play out an economic collapse. So factories closes, jobs vanishes, and a group of unemployed families pool their savings together to purchase cheap undeveloped land. They decide to build a town where everyone contributes and no one is left behind. And it can feel surprisingly modern then because they know everything, technology is available. So if you don't really want to just rough it from the beginning, then you can have something that you call the 12 founders. So instead of random families, every founder is chosen because they bring an essential skill. So this works well for balance. If you have someone who's a farmer, you have someone who's a carpenter, a teacher, a doctor, a mechanic, a merchant, a sheriff, an artist, a cook, a gardener, a politician, and a physical laborer. So, and I think I didn't add this initially, but you would also have an architect, as well, someone who designs your buildings. So this I've played out before, and it's nice because you play kind of a balanced thing, and then when you play rotations, you have the farmer that you're playing with, and they eventually run the general store, or they sell to the person who's going to run the general store. The carpenter is making everything from wood, So this kind of explains where everything comes from. So I like that idea, and it was a lot of fun to play out. Each family arrives with only their basic supplies and a shared promise. If we work together, one day this wilderness will become a city. That premise gives every community lot a meaningful purpose and makes each thing that you unlock feel like a milestone in the town's history rather than just another building. It also creates a natural foundation for multi-generational storytelling, where later Sims inherit the legacy of the original founders. And what's nice with this, that I thought you could do as well, is if you let someone who's the artist basically paint a painting of each of your founders before they eventually die off, and then you can display that, for instance, in City Hall, all these paintings or photographs, if you just want a photo of them, where you have, your founders, basically, that everyone is kind of remembering fondly eventually when you have new generations. So yeah, I think it can make for very interesting storytelling because you eventually have the mayor's kids, and do some of them want to follow in his footsteps? Maybe there's rivalry eventually, or maybe you have, I created a story once where the son of the mayor wanted nothing to do with politics. So, you could, once your city is built or the basis is there and you're into a next generation, it doesn't have to end. I know some people say that, okay, you've kind of reached your goal and that's where it ends. No, I don't view it like that. I think you can absolutely continue on with that neighborhood, and then you've started it from scratch and you have a whole backstory of how the founders started it. And then as you play on with the next generations, you kind of add some drama, you kind of add that someone has no appreciation for it, and that others do, or they refer back to the people who started their city or their town, or maybe someone who wants to follow in their footsteps and go create a different civilization. So you could add a subhood and then, for instance, play out that some people left from here and went somewhere else to start a civilization. You know, and it could be the subhood, so you're kind of still playing with their old families back home, but you have them where they are in their new circumstances. I just think there's so many possibilities that you can use for these type of challenges. So I really hope that these ideas inspired you. I was brainstorming quite a bit with this, and I will add one final idea for you guys, which I am not so good at machinima making, although I have such an appreciation for people who are. Just camera control is not my strong point, if I can put it that way. Even though the creativity is there, I just, I'd really have to work on that skill. But, you know, if you created a whole machinima series from this, your gameplay footage, that could be so much fun. It would be a lot of work, but just think of how amazing that would be if you were to share that type of story online and you actually had a machinima series where, so those of you who are machinima creators, you could have a whole Build-a-City challenge that you turn into a machinima, and I think you would have loads of viewers for sure. So yeah, there's some nice ideas for you guys. Go be creative, create amazing Build-a-City challenges, and please share them with the rest of us. Tumblr and on Facebook, I run groups where you can share YouTube content specifically. I mean, you can share other stuff too, but the YouTube content is definitely mentioned in there. If you're making any YouTube content for Sims or for Paralives, I will mention this as well because I've created the same groups for that. Please come and I'll put the links in the description. Please come and join in and share what you've created. You know, whether it's Build-a-City challenges, whether it's just you creating Sims or Paras, or whether you're you know, having a whole elaborate story that you're playing out, whether you're just doing speed builds. Please come and share it because it's so nice to share it with each other and to enjoy each other's content. I've discovered a lot of new people like that I had no idea were posting such cool things. So, or whether you're making custom content and you're sharing tutorials on how to do it, whichever, please come and share it. It's loads of fun. And, you know, I'm really passionate about this. And I feel like it's so cool that this game, even though it's so old, has so many amazing things out there, whether it's custom content or gameplay ideas. And we're just all being really creative together. So thank you guys for listening to me blab and for joining in today. I am really thankful if you made it this far in the video. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. It's always fun to see more people interested. And yeah, be blessed, happy simming, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.